Welcome. As the days grow warmer, millions of New Yorkers are flocking to the 1,700 or so parks, playgrounds, and recreation facilities that trim the city in green and let it breathe. Overseeing all these oases, including 66 swimming pools and 14 miles of beaches, the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, Mitchell Silver. A year into his tenure, we will ask him about his vision, priorities, and progress. Also on the program today, backspin. Twitter has abruptly changed its policy, which means politicians can now erase their past tweets, especially the embarrassing ones. Then, in our public intellectual segment, a new study reveals that people are indeed worried about all the personal data marketers are gathering about us, but feel powerless to resist. And later in the hour, out in the outer boroughs, Gay Pride Month beyond Greenwich Village. First, the man Mayor Bill de Blasio chose last May to make our park system serve us better and more equitably. He is Mitchell Silver, an internationally renowned city planner who, as a child, played in the parks. He now visits incognito to see how things are going. This week, his department is celebrating the reopening of a new High Line of sorts, Highbridge, the 1842 aqueduct linking the Bronx to Manhattan. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I want to start with the news of the week, which is the opening of the Highbridge. And we're going to put up some slides of the Highbridge then and now. So let's go to the very first one. And this is a shot from a long, long time ago.
It is. The Highbridge used to be an aqueduct, and it carried water from upstate to New York City to help a growing city. And so you're seeing this beautiful civil engineering marvel that is still as beautiful today as it was back then.
And just to give people a perspective on what they're seeing in this first slide, this is the view from the Bronx to Manhattan. Notice all the arches in the structure as it goes across the Harlem River there. Now let's go to the next slide, and we will see, oh, this is another historical shot. And this is going to be amazing for baseball fans, Commissioner. As you know, besides the Highbridge itself, that stadium down on the left, as we look Manhattan to the left, the Bronx to the right, I think that's the Polo Grounds.
I think you're correct. That is the Polo Grounds.
Where the New York Giants baseball team played, where the Mets played for their first couple of years before Shea Stadium opened in 1964. And then right across the bridge there, that must be the 155th Street Bridge, and there down in the lower right-hand corner, you don't see as much of a stadium structure, but that's Yankee Stadium.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right? So as you go further up, you can see that Highbridge over there. And let's see, help us out with this perspective.
Well, it appears as if we see the Highbridge again, which is the bridge to the south, because I'm looking at the water tower structure, I believe. So that, I believe, I'm trying to see which two bridges these are. No, actually it's not, because that one has arches. So I'm not sure exactly what view we're looking to.
Right, and
here.
I think
Oh, there is a water tower. I'm sorry. I see the pool at Highbridge, so it looks like the one to the south is, in fact, the Highbridge.
The Highbridge.
Water tower, and then I see the pool at Highbridge.
And there already, by this time, you see the arches are still there over the eastern portion, but the part that's actually going over the river, it's been replaced by that one steel span.
That's correct. These are the Highbridge steps, and it just shows you that this also is going to be restored, and this is a way you can actually gravitate down. So those are essentially the steps that you'll see next being renovated.
I'm told that this shot is from 1886.
I wouldn't be surprised. The bridge was completed in 1848, so it's very likely that that shot does predate the 20th century.
And the steps are still like that now?
They are. They're in somewhat of a state of disrepair, but that's now on the planning stages to restore that in cooperation with the Department of Transportation, and so that project will be moving forward in the near future.
So that's a lot of steps. People have to be in shape to get up there to walk across the Little Harlem River.
Many of our parks, Fort Greene, people are now using steps to exercise. They run up the Empire State Building. This one will be a little more open air, but they can also get healthy and get great views at the same time.
I know the bicyclists have complained a little bit that there's no bike ramp to get up there.
Well, in terms of biking across, there were a number of bikers out yesterday when the bridge opened up. And so to be a biker in New York, as we start to put on all the ramps for accessibility, you can get to this from a location from the Highbridge and also on the Bronx side. There actually is a ramp you can get to the bridge.
You said for accessibility, so wheelchairs could get there too?
Wheelchairs can get there. Our bridge is fully accessible. We had our commissioner, Victor Calise, was out yesterday, not only celebrating the opening of the Highbridge, but also the 25th anniversary of the ADA Act. And we were very proud to show the Highbridge and its full accessibility.
That's great. I think we're about to flash forward into the present. 3, 2, 1. Green.
Beautiful. So yesterday was a big day, 45 years in the waiting. And now we are restoring a beautiful icon. We're connecting to communities. Now, if you look at this beautiful view, there are places to sit. If you're a senior and need a place to rest or just take in the beautiful views, the water tower is still there in Highbridge Park. And now people have access to 100-acre Highbridge Park. There's a recreation center. There's a pool, baseball fields, and trails. And now, for the first time in 45 years, people in the Bronx can enjoy and have access to all those wonderful amenities.
Let's linger on this shot for a minute. I want to ask you about a couple of things. Unlike the Highbridge, the High Line? The High Line, thank you, which is more green and park-like in that respect, you decided to make this kind of cobblestone. How come?
Well, number one, the width is about 17 feet. And if you started to add landscaping, it would really start to pinch the width of the bridge itself. There was a desire to return it back to the historical setting. Back then, this was a place where people put on their Sunday best and would stroll back and forth and take in the views and enjoy the breeze. And so we wanted to recreate that history, the historic railing. Of course, we have security fencing is also important. And so for us, it's about 1,450 feet long. It's a quick stroll, believe it or not, even though it looks that long. And so for us, it was about the views and not just about having landscaping here. And again, the width was about 17 feet. It would have really constrained both cyclists and pedestrians to really enjoy this experience.
That many feet, that's less than a third of a mile. So maybe like walking 7 blocks.
Right. We said if you walk back about 3 times, you're close to about a mile. So I'm sure people will pick up quickly. But like I said, it's a short walk. We walked it several times yesterday, and people will realize how quickly you can get from one side to the other.
And there were only a couple of benches there on that view. Is that because some are still being built, or there are just a couple of benches?
No, there are just a couple of benches. They're a little bit more closer to the Manhattan side. I believe the view you're looking at is on the Bronx side. But our goal, again, is a quick walk, but if there are some seniors that need a place to rest. But also we picked key places where you have some of the most dramatic views. So going back to the past, it was a place where people strolled to go from one point to the other. But of course, people are going to stop and take in the views.
And this was just taken a few days ago, so you're still reinforcing the structure there.
Yes. In terms of the path itself, it is safe and open officially, and we just still want to do some other work on the substructure itself, but it's all safe, and there's just what we call some punch list items the contractors are finishing up, but is now open and ready for visitors.
All right. Let's talk about the rest of the city parks. That was a great introduction to our newest reopened public space in New York City. Thank you. Inequality has been the centerpiece of the de Blasio administration, and I think you were chosen with your background in urban planning rather than parks per se to help foster that vision with respect to parks. Is that how you see it?
I do. I have about 20 years experience in dealing with issues of equity. And so we understand if you want to be a sustainable city, there's 3 E's. There's the economy, the environment, and equity. Very often equity is forgotten in this conversation of sustainability. And so I shared the mayor's vision for equity. And very early on, we did a very quick analysis to find out how equitable is our park system. We took an analysis and found out how many parks in our city had less than $250,000 invested in over the past 2 decades. And it turned out there were 215. These parks hiding in plain sight. Families and neighborhoods that did not enjoy a quality park for over 2 decades. So the mayor decided that that's where we're going to focus our attention first. So we call it the Community Parks Initiative. Phase 1 is to transform 35 parks that are in high need, high poverty, and high growth areas. And I'm pleased to say those projects are moving forward and they're on schedule. The good news is, in this current budget, The mayor put another $150 million to recreate about another 40 parks. So we're beginning to address those underserved parks to address the equity in our park system. And we're also doing other targeted improvements to make sure that we do things immediately to improve those parks, whether it's safety surfacing, gardening, fixing fences. We just want to show these communities that we know you're there. You haven't had good investment in some 2 decades, and now we want to, I mean, equity to me is fairness. We want you to have a fair and equitable park system in your neighborhood.
You want to mention 1 or 2 early success stories, perhaps?
Well, in terms of the parks, in terms of the Community Parks Initiative, we switched our meetings from daytime to night, and as a result, we got, in some cases, over 100 people participating. We're beginning to transform some of these parks that is not just for play equipment, it's multi-generational. There are now more green spaces where seniors can now exercise and sit around and just enjoy green spaces. So for me, that is a big success, and those parks should be online by December 2017. Another major initiative was really expediting the capital process. When I got here, everybody said the process takes too long. And over the last year, which I believe is one of our biggest successes, is we were able now to bring all of our projects in terms of construction. We're now 91% on time for construction, and on budget now 89%. That's 20% percentage point improvements over the prior fiscal year. And for the first time in history, parks typically had a backlog of capital projects. By this fall, for the first time that we can even remember or count, that backlog will be gone, and we'll be able to get projects done a lot quicker. And I have to thank staff for really pushing hard to make sure we get those projects done sooner, more ribbon cuttings, and get these parks to the public as soon as possible.
One of your initiatives I know is called Parks Without Borders.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Essentially, parks don't just sit in isolation. They don't just sit behind walls. They're connected to communities and culture and neighborhoods. So we recognize that parks represents 14% of the city's land area. But if you add in sidewalks and streets, that's another 26%. That's 40% of the city's land area is within what we call the public realm. So rather than planning in isolation, we're working with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Environmental Protection to plan for this public realm as one system. The average citizen doesn't know when they're walking on park property or DOT property. It's just the public realm. It's a sidewalk. It's a park. And so we want to plan as a team so that we'll enjoy a lot more how we start to plan for the public space. In some cases, we'll be able to punch through a wall to provide better access to a community, lower fence heights so that people feel more connected to the park. And so we'll be doing a number of things over the next year to start to open up the parks, more green on streets, look very differently how we do tree wells. They're becoming a lot more popular where they're a lot wider with more vegetation. So it's a very exciting horizon that we want the entire city to experience parks in their neighborhoods.
And this is connected to public health too, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And green spaces, there are a lot of reports that are saying how it just helps the brain. And parks are not just for recreation, it's for mental health as well. I mean, parks help you feel alive. It's the living room of the city. Some people go there to recreate, others go there just to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and just enjoy the green space, enjoy being outdoors, just breathing the beautiful air, in some cases sitting there with your smartphone and just enjoying being outdoors. They're vital to a city like New York. We could not be the great city that we are without our parks.
It's funny you talk about Parks Without Borders and parks being seen as part of the larger infrastructure. You know the heritage of Robert Moses having been the Parks Commissioner, and people love him, people hate him, but he was Mr. Infrastructure Builder in New York City once upon a time, and the Parks Department Commissioner was such a seat of power.
Well, he, as you know, was a master builder and a master at accumulating a lot of power. We want to move from just being a master builder to a master planner. We want to create a 21st century park system. We do thank Robert Moses for a lot of the playgrounds and a lot of the civic works in terms of our public pools, saved a lot of lives from drowning in the river. But now we're in a new era. Demographics are changing, culture is changing, and we have to rethink our park system for the 21st century. Robert Moses era infrastructure is very expensive to maintain. So as we move to the future, we have to be very smarter and more resilient about how we plan for our parks, and that's part of our future as well, and start to plan for New York City to build a very sustainable and resilient park system that we can maintain over the next century.
You were working in city government in Raleigh, North Carolina, is that correct?
That is correct.
How different is it to plan and run a park system in New York City than in Raleigh?
Well, it's difficult to compare the two. They have different governance structures, so it's somewhat of an unfair comparison. New York is a lot larger. I would say Raleigh, North Carolina is about this population of Staten Island, so it's a lot smaller city. So you're able to move a lot quicker to get things done because you don't have as many agencies. Here, the public is very vocal. They want to be engaged on every step of the way, and you have to respect that. And so things take a little bit longer here, and I understand why, and it's a lot bigger. Here, my staff ranges from 7,000 in Raleigh, North Carolina. I believe our entire city government was 3,000. So scale is a little bit different, but the passion for parks and public spaces is the same in Raleigh, North Carolina as it is in New York City. Wherever I go, people love parks. And that, to me, is consistent whether in Raleigh, North Carolina, or New York City.
Do you find that people use parks differently, either from Raleigh to New York or from the past to the present,
Yes.
or neighborhood to neighborhood?
Well, number one, suburban neighborhoods tend to view parks very differently than places that are very high density. Suburban neighborhoods tend to have a lot more open space. They can do things on their front yard or backyard. When you get to more dense populations, open spaces mean something even more because they may have a small apartment, and so they serve as, whether a backyard or a front yard or a porch, however you want to call it, as that social space where people can go. So as you become more dense, open space becomes even more important. Suburban areas, while they do enjoy the open space, tend to focus on more of the recreation, so there are some differences. Culturally, it's very different. As we see different cultures moving to our city, desires for sports are changing. We see an emergence of cricket is now emerging, South American volleyball. And so we're always looking for the new sports that are emerging to see how we can start to change some of our facilities to really adapt to the new population. And now we're just seeing again, soccer is just becoming enormously popular in a lot of our parks. They tend to tear up our turf, and so we have to look at synthetic turf, which is more resilient. And so those are some of the changes. We have to adapt to a changing population, and it's something that we're doing.
How encouraged are you, or how troubled are you by some of the new funding models for parks, like at Brooklyn Bridge Park, where there's a lot of private money in exchange for certain kinds of development, or the conservancies? There was that big, was it $100 million gift not that long ago, and people from some of the poorer communities' parks howl that it's just increasing inequity and that there should be a tax on something like that.
In terms, we have to look at all options on the table to build our parks. There's not one city that I know of that is not trying to figure out ways to build their parks of the future. So as far as I'm concerned, public-private partnerships are good for New Yorkers. We have great public spaces, whether it's Brooklyn Bridge and other parks that are emerging, Hudson River Park. So to me, I would put everything on the table on how we build our parks for the future because the public benefits from some of these public spaces. The conservancies have been great partners. They understand our equity proposal. Each one of them, in terms of the 5 biggest, are all helping us with some of the other parks, understanding that we need to have a fair, equitable system. So I look forward to other examples. We're open to other models that may work, but the bottom line is we have to provide more public space, more open space to a city of 8.4 million people.
You got criticism in a DNA Info article recently for traveling too much and not being accessible enough to the people of New York. How do you see your own schedule in that respect?
Well, for one, those are prior commitments, but I don't think you can find a commissioner that spends more times in parks, in community meetings, than I think any other commissioner. I love spending time with community groups. On average, I probably do at least 3 or 4 meetings with community groups or being out in parks. And so I think it was truly an unfair criticism. They knew that these were prior commitments, and I'm dedicated to this job, love spending time in parks, love spending time with community groups, and I'm 100% accessible to any group, be it a community group or a community board that wants to sit down and talk to me. And so I enjoyed my past life and really bring some great examples from around the world here to New York City, and we're able to share some great ideas as I've traveled in the past.
When you go incognito into the parks on the weekend, what do you look for?
One, I look for just patterns of our maintenance and what I call care. You can maintain a park, but I look for care, and to me, those are little things that show me whether a park is cared for or not. I watch how people use the park, seniors, women, families, where they sit, how they're using the park. So it gives me some clues about what we're doing right, what we need to change in our park. So I do have some telltale signs. I look for where people are sitting. There are debates how much people like sunlight. I go into parks. Majority of people I see are under trees and under the shade. So I want to know who's in the sun, who's in the shade, and why, how they're using our parks. I like to look at the ratio between men and women and families. It gives me an indication about how safe or comfortable people feel in the park. And then I just look for clues about just overall maintenance and care to see what I need to do, what my staff needs in order to provide the very best park system possible.
This going incognito, what do you do? Do you wear a Bruce Wayne mask, or what do you do?
I just don't tell anybody I'm going to that park. I pick a borough, and I pick a couple of parks and playgrounds I just go into, and just, I don't have any parks. I don't have any logos on me or any park shirt or park hat. I just go as myself. Sometimes I get recognized. People know who I am. But most of the time I just walk around with a camera. I talk to people, and I just look like a regular New Yorker just enjoying the park.
So we'll blot out your face on this show like a CIA agent. So people
okay.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, a complaint from a friend of mine who plays tennis. And he says the $200 fee for a tennis permit is discriminatory against tennis players compared to other athletes who can just go and use the space or play on a team where they split the money so much. Is that too much to make people go play tennis?
Well, we've heard about the permit, and we are taking a look at it. I've heard this since I've been here, so I don't have an answer, but I hear him loud and clear. It's something I've heard before. And so this year we actually asked my staff, the season's now underway, to take a look at the permit and reserving the court situation to see what we can do for next year. No promises. We'll take a look at it.
Anything else you want to say?
Other than this is, I have to say, an incredible job to be in, to see what parks do for the average citizen, spending time, whether it's seniors or kids. This city, to me, is magical. It's an incredible place because of our parks. So I encourage people, please, as you mentioned, we have parks, open spaces, beaches, rec centers. It's incredible what our park system offers for the citizens, and I look forward to spending more time in the parks and spending time with all our citizens to make sure we have the best equitable park system in the world.
New York City Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silver, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Twitter, the communications platform, has long been a darling for the press for facilitating democracy movements around the globe and enabling grassroots movements to take root here at home. American politicians have been big supporters, seeing an opportunity to get a message out quickly to many constituents, which brings us to PolitWhoops, a government watchdog service launched 3 years ago to monitor those elected officials on Twitter and hold them accountable by preserving newsworthy, sometimes embarrassing, messages that they have deleted. And yet, despite the service's widespread popularity with the press and transparency advocates, it all came to an end this past week when Twitter abruptly shut down their access, citing a breach of its own privacy rules. Nico Margulies is not happy. He ran PolitWhoops for the pro-transparency group, the Sunlight Foundation, and joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Hello from New York. Thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Why did Twitter do this, according to Twitter?
Well, they told us that it violated their developer agreement, and that's something that we both had known from the beginning. When we first launched the site in 2012, it launched to a lot of press, and Twitter got in touch with us, and they told us, your service violates our terms of service on a fundamental level. And we spoke to them, and we worked out an agreement where we would screen out some of the low-value tweets. We'd have someone on staff do that, and they would let us continue. And that's the way the site had been operating very, very successfully for 3 years. And so when they came back to us and suspended our account for the same reasons, it was quite a surprise.
What are these low-value tweets and high-value tweets? What's the distinction there?
So the way we determine that is having a human actually determine the journalistic value of each deletion. We was very specific. So if you go to the site, there are still thousands of tweets that don't seem very important. But we're actually screening out typos and wrong links and photos that were sideways if they are corrected. So what frequently happens is that, as anyone on Twitter knows, you tweet something, you put an apostrophe where you shouldn't have, and you delete it and you fix your error in a couple minutes. And that happened regularly, and we were taking those out. But you still see those simple errors because a lot of politicians would never bother to correct them. So they would make a typo, and they would notice 5 minutes later, and they would just give up on the whole thing. So the site has about 15,000 deletions that are archived, and it's definitely chock full of minor issues, but it's a great resource to try and dig in there and find stories.
What are some of the more major issues that you found? How has PolitWhoops influenced journalism or provided source material for journalism that has mattered?
So one of the really exciting things that I found in the site was that because we weren't creating any of the content and we really didn't know what to expect, every time I checked the site, it was a surprise. I didn't know what topic politicians would be talking about and deleting. There was a lot of research trying to follow what was this deletion about, call their office. And I think on Twitter, because of the sort of immediate nature, and a lot of people are also able to see a very controversial tweet immediately. So obviously, I hesitate to bring this up, but Anthony Weiner is the most obvious politician error on Twitter, and that was before our service existed. And because it was so surprising, someone took a screenshot the second they saw it, and that's how that story leaked. But what PolitWhoops was able to do was catch politicians deleting things a couple days later, a couple hours later. You're not going to go back and screenshot every tweet and then check on it every day forever. So we were able to get stories when the political winds changed, things of that nature. So the most obvious example was when Sergeant Bo Bergdahl was released by the Taliban last summer. It was news that was greeted by a lot of politicians, saying, "Welcome home." I think Joni Ernst, who was then a Senate candidate, said, "My prayers are with Sergeant Bo Bergdahl and his family." And then soon after the details of his release came forward, that there was an exchange for Taliban members held in Guantanamo. It became a very politically charged issue. And a number of politicians went back and deleted their original sort of welcoming remarks from days prior. So it was, I think, about 5 Republicans and a Democrat who went back and decided they didn't want to be on record saying, "Welcome home, Sergeant Bo Bergdahl."
Right. So they deleted their tweets. And you mentioned Congressman Jeff Miller, in the past, a Republican from Florida. He had a deleted tweet, I guess responding to a Facebook poll asking if President Obama was born in the United States. And then he deleted his entire Twitter account, only later to return to the service. But you grabbed that one before he could disappear it?
Yeah, so we had started running the service before we publicly launched, and we were collecting a bunch of deletions. And the day we launched, I believe it was Slate, picked up on that specific deletion, sort of asking. He was asking his Facebook followers from, I believe, his official Facebook account, do you believe that Obama was born in the United States? And this was after that this was sort of after it had been so talked about in the media. It was sort of settled at that point. And his reaction to the questions from Slate was to delete his entire Twitter account, which is not what we would want. And fortunately, he sees the value in Twitter and came back to the service later.
What was it exactly about all of this that was violating the terms of service agreement with Twitter? Why don't they like this?
So the statement that they originally released to Gawker and then to a number of other outlets who were covering the shutdown of Troops, it said they were honoring user privacy and that they want to honor the privacy of all accounts, whether they're anonymous or a member of Congress. And that...
I don't get the privacy thing because it's a public posting.
Yeah, I mean, all these statements were made publicly. We're not catching their direct messages, their private messages. These are things that are public and on Twitter.com for any user of the service, or even just any visitor to the website. And what we're really doing is just archiving those statements to let anyone see them instead of those that just happen to be on Twitter.com at the right time.
The European Union established what they call the right to be forgotten. Mm-hmm. Is that a parallel to this? And did something like PublicPrivate originate over there and kind of inspire you guys over here?
Not that I'm aware of. I think our democracy is very much predicated on the idea that those in power have a different expectation of privacy than a private citizen. We have all sorts of requirements. If you're a powerful person in this country, an elected official, you have to release financial records. Of course, the whole system of campaign finance. These are regulations that apply to those in power and those seeking power. And I think to say that an anonymous Twitter account is the same privacy expectation as a member of Congress or the president, I think is at odds with what people think of when they think of democracy.
And privacy, because I guess that's a conflict that a lot of people haven't resolved for themselves yet, or a contradiction. And later in the program, we're going to be doing a different segment about how marketers use people's data and get people's data without them quite realizing it. That's a privacy issue.
Absolutely.
You've got a transparency issue. And so people have some conflictedness over, well, what value do I want from, the internet world? Do I want it to be transparent because we're sitting here saying that's a good thing? Or do I want more privacy because we're about to sit here and say that's a good thing? But you're saying it depends on who we're talking about.
Absolutely. One interesting wrinkle in this whole episode is that the Sunlight Foundation was very involved in changing House rules to even get members of Congress on Twitter. Members of Congress were not allowed to use services like Twitter or YouTube because of regulations around franking and sort of they didn't want official statements to appear alongside ads that couldn't be controlled. And, through a lot of work on Sunlight's and other people's parts, we were able to convince them to change the rules. And, we even had a campaign called Let Our Congress Tweet. I remember Biz Stone wrote about it on the Twitter blog supporting our efforts. We are very much in favor of members of Congress and other politicians communicating with voters and constituents. We just think that there's an important layer of accountability that needs to come through in transparent ways. So,
could this have an impact on other countries, including ones with emerging democracies, maybe some of the Arab Spring states like Egypt and Tunisia, also Turkey?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a universal interest in the public statements of politicians. That's a big part of their role. They're supposed to be representing the people, and when they change their opinions, change their mind, expose certain sentiments that they hold but don't say publicly normally, I think these are universally, it's a universal aspect of politics. And the Sunlight Foundation did not come up with PublicPrivate. The idea and the original code actually comes from the Netherlands, an organization called the Open State Foundation. And I believe the site is operating in about 30 countries, including places like Egypt. So I think you're right. There's definitely interest around the world for this type of accountability tool.
But I guess Twitter hasn't gone after them. 30 seconds left. Any chance of getting it back, or some kind of workaround that allows you to monitor politicians' tweets in the same way?
Well, it certainly sparked a lot of conversation, which I think is very important. I'm confident that this is not the end of projects to monitor tweets, but Sunlight doesn't have any immediate plans in that end.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Time for Public Intellectual, where we look at new research with the power to change our minds and public policy. In the internet era, our age, gender, what we buy, read, search for, watch, and listen to have become commodities for marketers. The common wisdom is that most people happily, willingly give away their personal data in trade for convenience, a convenient internet, and consumer services. However, a new report shows that most people are actually uncomfortable about sharing their personal data, but feel powerless to resist. The report is called The TradeOff Fallacy: How Marketers Are Misrepresenting American Consumers and Opening Them Up to Exploitation. We are joined via Skype by the lead author, Joseph Turow, professor at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. Hello, Dr. Turow. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Hi.
What basic research question were you trying to answer, first of all?
Well, I would say it was more of an applied research question, but it has some basic implications. We were, exactly as you were saying, trying to confront the long-time claim by the marketing community that it's all about trade-offs, that people accept the idea of trade-offs as the reason that they give up their data. And also, we were trying to see whether academics have been correct, and I've been among them, who say that the reason people give up their data is primarily because they don't know much, that they're ignorant about things. And we found that both of those things are actually incorrect. The trade-off part is really incorrect. We found, interestingly enough, that the more a person knew about marketing rules and regulations and how the internet worked according to questions we asked, the more likely that person was to be resigned.
Resigned, meaning they may not like the idea, but they felt powerless to resist?
Exactly, and those were the two statements that we used to, in different parts of, we didn't just ask them one after another, but we had a bunch of statements, and among them were those two, and if the person answered both of them, we called it and agreed with them, we said that person was resigned.
They used to say knowledge is power. You're telling us knowledge is powerlessness.
Yeah, and I think one of the implications, and this is also anecdotal, we've been hearing this, my colleagues and I think anybody thinking about it would reflect this, that, if you know a lot about the way this works, with a very few people who go to the extreme of really tinkering with everything, you say there's nothing much I can do about it.
Well, who's getting hurt and how by this trade-off or illusion of trade-off if the worst that's happening is people are being shown products that are similar to ones that they bought before or shopped for in the past? What exactly is the harm in this trade-off, even if people don't feel really good about it and don't feel they have a choice?
Well, that's an excellent question. And that's another issue that the marketing community has brought up, saying, well, what's the difference? Just ads. There are three answers to that, actually four. The most contentious problem, the most difficult problem, is that a lot of these characteristics of people, in many cases, do get used for things like payday loans, or maybe even some ways of deciding who should get insurance ads, okay? So that's a very specific way in which a person might not see certain things or might not get certain offers based upon profiles that people are making about them that they don't even know about and haven't even given permission to. The other reasons are more kind of squishy, I would say, but I would say just as important. marketing and advertising is not just a few ads. What marketing does is it shows you the world. It allows you to be included in certain kinds of ideas about what's important and what products you might want to consider. What profiling does, in the kind of predictive analytics we're talking about, it gives people different views without their really knowing why. So you might see certain kinds of discounts or ads that I might not see. You might get certain kinds of privileges that I might not, based upon profiles. So there's an inherent discrimination that is already beginning to take place. People getting different prices based upon what marketers think about them. And the third part, which is a kind of long-term historical issue, we're going back to the future. Really, before 1850, if you went into a merchant pretty well showed you goods that merchant thought would be useful to you based on the stereotypes or knowledge that merchant had, and prices were not posted. You argued, you contended with the merchant over the prices. We're moving back to an era in which prices that are posted are not necessarily the prices that you're going to get. And the kinds of things that you are going to see, whether it be online or even in the store, highlighted for you, are going to be based upon profiles that companies have on you, related to hundreds of data points potentially.
Could that be a good thing in a funny kind of way? Like, if they know that one customer makes $500,000 a year, and they know that another one makes $50,000 a year, they're going to kind of means test the cost of things and charge the affluent person more for the same item and set the price lower for somebody of less means at the point where they think they might actually buy?
That actually might happen. The opposite happens too sometimes. So, for example, I spoke to one person in a major retailer who said that they analyze people based upon their loyalty. And if they see that a formerly loyal person is beginning to get less loyal, they would charge them less for a product than a loyal person. If you want to see how this works on an everyday basis, and we're only beginning, look at the way the airlines treat people. Okay, the airlines treat people essentially like garbage unless they want them because they're business people who have loyalty points. If you don't belong to a loyalty program in an airline, you're treated like dirt. And the airlines don't care about it, frankly. The interesting thing is, when I sit at airline gates, I never see people revolting. And the real question becomes, are people going to get upset about that? Or is it going to be, as the article that described my research in the New York Times said, like the frog that after a while gets slowly boiled to death and doesn't even realize what's happened?
Yeah. Do you mean, though, when you say the airlines treat people who aren't in their clubs like dirt, that it's about how they're treated at the gate, boarding privileges, how they're treated on the plane, things like that? Or is it also with respect to price in some way?
Well, price is a mysterious thing with airlines. They like to say that it has to do with purely economic algorithms. We don't really know why people get certain prices and other people get other prices. There are all these urban legends about that. It's hilarious. People will go to friends' houses to do their final airline ticketing because they think that they may get lower prices there because the airline knew what you had been looking for previously. Same with hotels. Fascinating urban legends about this. But the most significant thing in recent years has been the overhead possibilities. If you don't have zone 1 or 2, or even before that, the chances of your being able to put an overhead case on a rack really go down exponentially. And a lot of people simply feel they have to have that ability, and that's why they take the same planes. Even I met someone just this weekend who took a circuitous path home because she wanted to get the airline points.
The most common 6 words I think I see on airline sites these days is, only 2 seats left at this price.
Yes, right. That's,
I want to put up, before you go, I want to put up a couple of charts of your data from this study so people can see a little bit of what you measured. If companies give me a discount, is it a fair exchange for them to collect my information about me without my knowing it? 91% disagree with that statement. Let's go right to the next one, because that one is so clear. It's fair for an online or physical store to monitor what I'm doing online when I'm there in exchange for letting me use the store's wireless internet or Wi-Fi without charge. 71% disagree with that.
Even though that happens all the time, Brian.
So if you're in a store, free Wi-Fi, they're doing what?
Yeah. They're tracking you. Now, they may not know who you are, or they may, but stores give people Wi-Fi partly for them to use their apps, and the apps then are an opportunity for them to interact with you and track you. The app is a honeypot. The app is, of course, you do get something from it, don't get me wrong, but one of the main reasons for apps in stores is because they want to know what you're doing through the store.
So are we powerless?
No, I don't think we're powerless. I wouldn't want to give that impression. One of the things that, for example, apps do, and even the cell phone does when you move through a store, you can really compete with that store on price in ways that you could never have done before, okay? So in that way, we're not powerless. I'm just trying to bring the debate forward about what does it mean in a society where we're profiled and categorized and scored in ways that fundamentally have to do with the central aspects of American life, commerce and shopping, and we have no clue how it works and have no control about it.
Interesting study. Thank you so much. Very enlightening.
Thank you. Take care.
That's Public Intellectual for today. Being out in the outer boroughs next, Gay Pride Month beyond Greenwich Village. June is Gay Pride Month, but here in New York, the big parade and celebration of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender pride is not just a West Village thing. Each of the 5 boroughs has its own pride celebration. Here's what Queens Pride looked like in Jackson Heights this past weekend. From Christopher Street, but it's no small party, of course. LGBT New Yorkers live in all 5 boroughs. However, that doesn't guarantee that services such as community centers are distributed evenly throughout the city. One borough that stumbled in its efforts to hold on to a safe space for LGBT communities is the Bronx. The former Bronx Pride Center closed in 2012. Now a center without a physical home has been trying to fill the void. With us is Peter Frank of the Bronx LGBTQ Center, miles from Christopher Street. And with us as well, Jeffrey Padilla, Bronx native and educator with Iris House that serves as a health center for LGBT individuals. Welcome both of you to the program.
Thank you, Brian.
Peter, I see your organization is new and came on the heels of a different group that had issues. You want to tell us a little bit about the background story of your center?
Well, we started after the closure of the old Bronx Community Pride Center, and it was basically, I've had a bunch of friends in the Bronx. I've been spending time in the Bronx. I've lived in the Bronx, and we were asking ourselves, what is the community going to do without a center? And the obvious answer was we need to build a new one. So we got together, started working on it, and incorporated in September of 2012. Since then, we've been working to build and grow and get funding for space to provide certain services and partner with other organizations like Iris House to provide other services. In the Bronx, we've also held Bronx
Such
Pride.
as most important services?
Most importantly are services for our youth, our transgender communities, our elders. We work with SAGE, which is another wonderful organization.
For senior
for,
gay people?
For elder gay and lesbians. we also, and I mean, everyone in the community basically has some need, whether it's social need, recreational, whether it's a health issue, a mental health issue. You know, we're a community filled with needs, and even, you know, there business issues. So there are people who are working in our community who would like to network and in an environment that's safe, that they don't have to feel they have to hide who they are, and just, you know, sure.
Good. Where does Iris House come in?
Well, we're actually based in Harlem. We have actually partnered with the Bronx LGBT Center for the last 3-4 years or so. We have seen the change in the structures in the Bronx when it comes to LGBT services. And Iris House has led in not only providing services for young gay men ages 18 to 24 who are African American Latino, but also providing services to everybody in the family. Now, where we come in is actually lending help by actually providing a table with materials and HIV/AIDS information, as well as resources that where young men can go for health visits, or even find a place like the Bronx LGBT Center, or even resources as education and beyond.
So what's it like to be gay in the Bronx? Is it different from being gay in Manhattan?
Well, it's no different than that. I mean, as someone who grew up in the Bronx myself, I've been through the elementary, junior high school, and high school itself, and it's no different than being in downtown. The only difference is that you're actually learning how to get out your own cocoon without being labeled as an LGBT person. So you're pretty much identifying who you are through the life in the Bronx, and then when you actually find yourself a little bit more open about who you are, then you actually come out and share with the community.
Tell us your story. How did you do that?
Well, the way I came out was actually interested. It actually took me back to college where I did have a girlfriend. I had to tell my girlfriend that I was actually a gay man, and I actually disclosed to her. I felt that I didn't want to go in my life actually living a lie, and I didn't want to bring up a relationship, bring kids, and mix all those emotions, and kind of like
You had, if this isn't too personal, you had a girlfriend because you were still exploring your own sexuality and figuring yourself out?
Actually, no, I had a girlfriend because I did love my girlfriend. It was not about exploiting myself. I always knew that I had an attraction for women, but it's not until that I was 17 that I knew more and deeply that I would actually have more feelings for men.
Peter, how about you on being gay in the Bronx as opposed to what we think of as the gay parts of the city?
Right. Well, the biggest challenge in the Bronx is that there's no central location where the LGBTQ community comes together. You know, in Manhattan, we think of the Village, Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen. In Queens, there's Astoria, Jackson Heights. In Brooklyn, there's Williamsburg and Park Slope. So in the Bronx, it's more of, you know, there's somebody on this block, there's somebody in this building. It's a very block by block, building by building type of thing. So it's much more difficult to bring people together because there is no kind of gathering spot. And that's what we're trying to do with the center, is provide a gathering spot where people from all these different places and buildings and blocks in the Bronx can come together and feel safe and explore who they are, get services, you know, commune with other people, find friends, socialize.
And how do you have a center without a physical space?
Well, we are working on raising the funds to get a physical space. So right now, Union Community Health Services in the Bronx has been one of our major sponsors. They provide space for certain services. We offer like a free legal clinic, which is on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, sorry. And we also have LGBTQ youth support services that are on hiatus right now. They'll restart in October. So there are certain services that we're offering where organizations like Union or Iris House provide space for us to do the services.
We saw the video of the Pride Month event in Jackson Heights. Mm-hmm. Is there something like that in the Bronx?
Absolutely. The Bronx traditionally has held their Pride event in July after all the other boroughs. I think it's been too crowded. So as far as I know and what people have told me, when Daniel Drum started doing Pride in the outer boroughs.
City Council Member Drum.
Right, City Council Member Drum. I think he did it in July, and it's just been carried on in that tradition in the Bronx. So our Pride event is July 18th this year. It's the third Saturday.
July.
So it's July 18th. It's the third Saturday of July. And this year we've actually expanded our celebrations. Last year, this is the third year we're doing it. Last year we incorporated community-based awards into the event. And this year we're moving those awards into a separate dinner, which will be held on July 14th. So our Pride event will be more celebratory, more fun, more dancing and performances, and then we can focus on the awards in a separate event and recognize people in the community who are really changing lives, who don't get the spotlight, who don't seek the spotlight.
And you started to react when I asked him about gay pride events in the Bronx. Anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, actually, I'm a native for the Bronx, and being the fact that we have been highlighting LGBT services in the Bronx plus the Pride, I think it's very important. You asked if I have any kind of experience. Well, when I graduated from high school, that's when I actually learned that we have an LGBT club, but that I was already graduating, so I didn't get an opportunity to find out all these resources. I get an opportunity to also mingle with other young gay men. I didn't get an opportunity to learn more about myself. So having this Pride event in the Bronx, not only just mean Pride, but also the love that we have for our community and ourselves.
And I see the Bronx Pride Festival is called the 2015 Bronx LGBTQ Pride and Health Fair.
Right. We actually incorporated a health fair component into our event. Because we have limited resources, we can't have a separate health fair. So this year we're very thrilled actually to be able to offer mammogram screenings courtesy of SVH Health System St. Barnabas Hospital, in addition to other health screenings like HIV and STD testing. But we really are trying to focus this year more on general health, because when people think of LGBTQ health, the main thing is either HIV/AIDS or it's recovery. We're really looking at health issues that affect people in the Bronx, such as cardiovascular health, diabetes, obesity, breast health, prostate health.
All that stuff at Iris House too?
Right.
Your typical clients?
Yes. Actually, through Iris House, I've been able to, like I said, serve the population, 18 to 24 young men. But in conjunction with the LGBT Center, we actually combined the resources so that we could be able to provide all this information. Now, needless to say that it is the heart of the Bronx. A lot of people may think that you may have access to resources, but until you're not at that first one, you really learn who are the community partners that are there for you. And it's important to have that face-to-face contact.
Well, thank you both for coming. Good luck with the festivities and with all your important work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And that's our program for today. We are here with a new show at this hour each week. Next time, Ralph Nader on the presidential race. Spoiler alert, he's not running. Also on third parties with Ralph Nader and the big issues, including the pending Trans-Pacific trade deal that Nader says surrenders U.S. sovereignty to the multinational corporations. And tune into my radio program weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.